Hi everyone, it's Alice, and because it has become a sort of tradition on this channel to make a video about witch books this time of year, today I thought I would tell you about my favorite witch books. As you might know, I love a witchy book, and I like all different kinds as well, so I've tried to organize the books today into different sections, even though some of them could technically fit into more than one. I've tried to organize this a little bit. These are my favorite witchy books that I've read though, so I would really recommend all of them. Let's start on the lighter end of the spectrum with some books that I feel like all fit somewhere within like cozy fantasy. So these books are a little bit lighter and not too heavy. The first one we have is The House Witch, and this is a blend of like fantasy, romance, and a little bit of mystery, and it's set in this kingdom where we meet the new royal cook who starts working in the royal castle, and he is a little bit of a mysterious character. No one really knows who he is or where he's from, and the minute he gets there, he sort of rubs everyone the wrong way, so it's clear that he's hiding something. Eventually, though, his story comes to light, and the story is about managing life in this castle and in this new position, and there's some intrigue with both the royals and the servants, and we're kind of just following the lives of these people. There's magic, there's a lot of cooking and food, and it's just a very cozy and wholesome story, but not without a little bit of intrigue and a little bit of mystery. The second one I have is In the Company of Witches by Auralee Wallace, which is a cozy mystery. This is set in a small, sleepy New England town where we meet a woman who is a witch who help her aunts run this bed and breakfast, and then one day someone dies at the bed and breakfast, and though it initially looks like an accident, it comes to light that maybe it wasn't after all. One of the aunts becomes the prime suspect though, and this is what spurs the main character to try and figure out what actually happened. But she has a lot going on in her life. A few years ago she lost her husband, and she's still grieving the loss of that, and because of that she refuses to use her witchy powers, which is that she can talk to ghosts. So the story is about her trying to solve this mystery, but also dealing with a lot of stuff on her own, and it's in part about the mystery and in part about her journey. I really like that this is super cozy, it's witchy, the setting of this town is just excellent, but it's also not without depth. It has like some interesting themes and some emotional bits, and all of this together just makes for a great read. Then we have one that leans a little bit younger, but I still really enjoyed this. It's A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. This is set in a magical city, and we meet this 14-year-old who has magical powers, but she feels that they are very unimpressive because her magic only works on bread, and like she can only use it on baked goods, and her familiar is a sourdough starter. So this gives you an idea of the vibe of this book. Like there's obviously some humor in here. I think a bread witch sounds amazing though, like I wish I was one. The story takes off when the main character finds a dead body in her bakery though, and it appears like someone is hunting magical people in the city, and the story sort of takes off from there. I think this is delightful though. I think the magical world we see in here is a lot of fun. It's a little silly, but it's very cozy and just really enjoyable. We also have a graphic novel called Mooncakes. This also follows a teenage girl who works in her grandmother's like magical bookshop, but in her free time she likes investigating supernatural occurrences around her little town, and one night when she's out investigating she runs into a wolf who turns out to be her childhood crush, who is a werewolf. This is very cute. I love the art in here, and it's all about family and friendship, and it's just a nice little treat of a book. The second section is going in the opposite direction, which I'm just calling dark fantasy. So these books are darker in atmosphere and vibe, and they lean a little bit more into the horror side of things. We have another T. Kingfisher book here. It's A Sorceress Comes to Call, and the witch in here is actually the mother of the main character, who is a sorceress, and she is something else. Like, she is very interesting, and she decides in the beginning of the book that they need to leave their small like village because there has been a suspicious death. So you can imagine what happened there. And the mother decides that she wants to settle down, so she wants to try and trick this wealthy guy into marrying her, and they will be like set for life. The mother is like actually really terrible though, and she's in a way broken down her daughter. But obviously the daughter has to come, and they get to this manor house, and luckily the sister of the wealthy guy who the mother is trying to seduce, she immediately sees this daughter and is like, something is not right here. So it becomes a story of this daughter and the aunt coming together to stop this sorceress. This is dark and it has some horror scenes in it that have really stuck with me, but if you've read anything from this author, you might know that she usually weaves in a little bit of humor in her books. And even though this is dark and it's about dark magic, a thing that also shows up in this book is a super protective flock of geese that runs around this like manor house. And I honestly feel like this book is worth reading just for the flock of geese because they really are very funny. I also, of course, have to mention Slewfoot by Brom, which is set in colonial New England, where this spirited young woman becomes a widow pretty soon after she arrives in the colony. And after she becomes a widow, she stays on the farm where she lives, and she decides to sort of try and live on her own and have life on her own terms, which you can imagine how happy the townspeople are about that, especially like the men in power. At the same time as this is happening, there's also an ancient creature awakening in the forest, and the story sort of follows both of them. I don't want to give too much away, but people in the village start dying and it becomes a whole situation. There are actually some illustrations in here that I feel like capture the vibe of the book very well. So this is dark, but I would say it's like deliciously dark, but especially towards the end there is quite a bit of horror. A somewhat similar book to Slewfoot actually is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This is also set in a puritanical society in a place called Bethel, and in this place the prophet's word is law. It's very religious and very rigid, and the main character that we're following, like, her existence is kind of like blasphemous because she is the product of her mother's union with an outsider. But she tries to live like the life you're supposed to live in this place. She tries to follow the rules and be submissive and devoted like all the other women and girls in this place. Something happens though where the main character is sort of lured into the dark wood that is surrounding this place that no one is supposed to go into, and the dark wood bestows upon her the journal of her mother, and she realizes that her mother might have been consorting with witches, which is very shocking to her. But then through this she also starts learning about the truth of this place where she lives, and that truth is also pretty shocking. The story goes on from there, and just like Slewfoot, it's dark and gothic. It has like interesting themes to it, and I think the horror in here is interesting. This next one has more of like a dark fairy tale vibe to it. It's The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. This is set on the edge of the Russian wilderness where it's winter for most of the year, and our main character lives there with her family, and she's quite happy actually. But then unfortunately her mother passes away, and her father travels to Moscow to find a new wife, and the woman that he brings back is very religious. And in this place where they live, it's common to like make sacrifices to household spirits to like protect where they live and protect different parts of the home. But this new wife immediately bans this because she feels that it's blasphemous, and she thinks that these household spirits are demons. Our main character can actually see these spirits though, so she sees the consequences of not making those offerings anymore, and she sees that it's really not good. And then at the same time, of course, there is an ancient power awakening in the forest, and all of this together soon makes things very complicated. This has excellent fairy tale and folklore vibes. I think the setting is excellent, and I really enjoyed following the main character through this story. It feels magical, and it has this like mystical feel to it. Then we have a couple of retellings, and these are quite different from each other, but I really liked both of them. The first one is the lovely Circe by Madeleine Miller, which is a retelling of the myth of Circe, who was born with the gift of witchcraft, and because of this she was banished to this deserted island by Zeus, where she hones her craft but also comes across a lot of different famous figures from mythology. What makes this book so good, at least in my opinion, is the writing. Like, the way this author writes is just so good, and I loved following the character in here and seeing her story, and there's something about the way this author writes that just makes everything really emotional and intense. The other one has a totally different kind of vibe, and actually like 80% of this book is vibe and atmosphere. So this is the kind of book that's kind of weird, and it's definitely not for everyone. It's Lady Macbeth by Reid, and this is a retelling of the story of Lady Macbeth, but I do think that sort of disregarding that when reading this is best. Probably when you come across things that you recognize from that story, you can appreciate it, but you really just need to go with the flow on this one. The story follows this woman, though, who marries a Scottish brute and moves to his court and has to try and survive that, which is pretty hostile. And she has like some weird magical gifts, and it becomes apparent that her new husband also has some like occult weird secrets, and there's something weird going on in the castle, and there's a lot going on. But it's also the kind of book where, because it's all vibes and all atmosphere, kind of not a lot happens as well, and it is strange, so it really isn't for everyone. But if you like these kinds of books, this is like gothic and weird and magical in a really interesting way. I also love a historical fiction book about witches, and even though some of the ones I've already mentioned are also historical fiction, I have even more of these that I have absolutely loved, and all of these books have a very like clear historical setting. We'll start with 3 of the books in the Practical Magic series. There are 4 in total, but I so far have only read these 3 and have absolutely loved them. So we have Practical Magic, we have The Rules of Magic, and Magic Lessons, all by Alice Hoffman. All of these books follow women in the Owens family, and this family is cursed in love, meaning anyone who falls in love with an Owens woman is doomed. And this curse pops up in varying degrees in these books, so we basically follow different generations of witchy women in this family. Practical Magic is set in the 90s, so calling this historical fiction is probably a little bit of a stretch, but the 90s are actually pretty far away now, so we're just gonna roll with it. This follows these 2 sisters who live with their aunts, and they live in this small town in Massachusetts where the Owens are kind of just blamed for everything, and they're kind of considered a little weird and outsiders, and all these 2 sisters want to do is escape this place and get away, but fate always brings them back. In the Rules of Magic, we actually get to meet the aunts from Practical Magic. So this tells the story of the 3 children of Susanna Owens. It's set in the 60s, and this mother raises her kids, who all have different magical abilities, with all of these rules, and the story is about these siblings and them basically trying to like dodge the family curse. Magic Lessons is the book where we get to see the origin of the family curse, though. This is set in the 1600s, where we meet Maria Owens, who's kind of like the matriarch of this entire line, and she travels from England to Salem because she follows this man who has said that he loves her. But then she gets there and realizes that he has basically abandoned her, and she is eventually accused of witchcraft, and the story is just about her and her life, and we get to see why this curse began. I thought it was great to see the origin of this curse, though, and even though I like all of the books in this series, this one is probably my favorite, maybe because I really like this kind of historical fiction. But what I think is so great about this author is that I think that she is an excellent storyteller. Like, you really feel immersed in her books. They're very atmospheric, and it's not just writing, it's like true storytelling. Then we have one that I read very recently. It's The Once and Future Witches by Alix E. Harrow, and I already knew I loved this author, so it was no surprise to me that I really enjoyed this book. It's set in 1893 in a place called New Salem, where witchcraft is mostly gone. It's here and there, like there are some things left, but mostly witchcraft is gone, and we meet 3 sisters who start studying the forgotten words and ways, in part to get some power for themselves in a very patriarchal society, but also in part to fight this dark rising power in this town. I really loved following the sisters in here. The magic is excellent, the historical setting is excellent, and this is dark, and I really liked that, especially this force that is growing in this town is like pretty creepy. But I also liked how we got to spend time with the sisters and getting to know their different dynamics. Like, it was just a really good mix, and it was a book that was very easy to get immersed in. Next, we have The Witches of New York by Amy McKay, which is set in New York in 1880, and we meet these women who run this tea shop that caters to the high society ladies of Manhattan, and they specialize in like palmistry and potions, but most importantly, guarding their clientele's secrets. Then the story sort of takes off when this young woman comes to their door and asks to basically become their apprentice, and these women take her in, and she has a magical gift. She has the power to like see and hear things that are not there, and then she just disappears. There's a lot more that happens after that, obviously, but that's how it begins, and this is a really good one. It's a story about magic and witches and women and friendship, and it's really atmospheric, and I really like the setting of it. I also think all of the supernatural stuff in here is really well done, and it's really good. We're then going to the 70s with this next one. It's Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. And this leans again more into the horror side of things, but it's very clearly rooted in this time, and it's a lot about the circumstances and like how it was in this time. It's about this 15-year-old girl who in the summer is sent to Florida to live in this home because she is pregnant. And she's sent there away from everyone she knows to have her baby there so no one can see her and to avoid the shame of it, I guess, which is obviously terrible. She gets there, she's alone and scared, but she meets all of these other young girls who are also there. Some of them are very young, and this place is just so oppressive. Like, everything the girls do is controlled. What they eat, what they talk about, what they do, so they have no freedom at all. But then one day, this traveling librarian gives the main character this occult book. And she reads this book and realizes that there might be some freedom in this, like, in what the book talks about. But it becomes clear throughout the book that nothing is ever free, and it's really not that easy. I think the mix of witchy and supernatural with all of the historical stuff and the themes in this book is just very interesting. There is a fair bit of horror in here, and some of it is supernatural, but a lot of it is actually just real life horror, and I thought that was very interesting. I think this is an interesting exploration of this time and this situation, and it's not the perfect book, but I do think that it is a very interesting read, and it's a book that I still think about a lot. There's also a particular witchy scene that like really stuck in my mind because I could really picture it when I read this book, where there are some witches in some trees, and I don't know why. I don't think that moment was supposed to be that impactful, but I think about that, like, mental image I have of that a lot, and it's kind of spooky. Lastly, I just have to include this one adventure book, and this is a little bit of a stretch because the witch in here is just a side character, but she's very well worth reading about. The book is Nettle and Bode by T. Kingfisher, again. And this is about these people who basically go on a quest. It's about this main character who realizes that she has to save her sister from her abusive prince husband, but she can't do it alone, so she recruits the help of a fairy godmother, a former knight, and a grave witch, and off they go together to save the sister. That is a very general summary of what this book is about, but the grave witch is obviously the witch in here, and she is just amazing, in part because she walks around with a staff, and perched on top of that staff is a chicken possessed by a demon. And this is just like my favorite thing. I think it's so funny, but it's also kind of like a dark book, and this mixed together is one of the reasons why I love this author so much. I think this might be my favorite book by her, but like, I think about that chicken and that witch all the time. They've really stuck with me, and I think that it's worth reading the book just to read about them. That was the last book in my stack for today though, which means we've reached the end of this video. Now, like I mentioned, I usually make a witchy book video once a year, so I will leave a link to the other ones that I've made in previous years in the description if you want to check them out. I would love to know what your favorite witchy book is, and if you have any witchy book recommendations, I would love to hear about it in the comments, and then everyone else can also get even more recommendations. And yeah, that was it for today. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!